Welcome, viewers. Thank you very much for coming today for our first annual pre-conference session. Today, I'm really excited to have one of my favorite creation apologists, Dr. Carl Werner, with us. In fact, when I started getting into apologetics and looking into creation and everything, your books, the Grand Experiment, just blew me away. In fact, probably were one of the most instrumental resources for getting me anchored in creation truth. Your work on fossils and the work that you did with your wife when you went around to dozens and dozens of different museums and took, I think it was, you told me, 60,000 pictures.
To update, 300,000 pictures and 100 museums.
Okay, 100 museums. No short order there. But the thing that's, I think, most incredible about your work with that is when you went behind the scenes with some of the leading curators and the scientists behind the museums and asked them very obvious questions like, why don't you display any of the 120 bird species that have been found with dinosaurs in dinosaur displays? Why don't you display mammals that have been found? 400 species of mammals found in dinosaur layers. Why aren't they ever in your displays? Questions like that, and then to listen to their answers when they come back with nothing is very, very telling. The other thing that blew me away when really getting into your work is when you would ask questions like, can you give me some examples of the transitions? Because I would expect if you're going to go from this type of a dinosaur to that type of a dinosaur, you're saying Triceratops and Ankylosaurus are the same, have the same ancestors, or that they go back and they lead to the same types of dinosaurs, you would expect a lot of different changes. You've got horns and a clubbed tail and things like that. Can you give me some examples of some in-betweens? And you listen to their responses and you look at their museum graphs and they have nothing. It's almost terrifying because they have a swing and a miss. It's like they really are working on faith to produce their ideas of evolution. So your works, I can wholeheartedly endorse them. They're incredible. Then you came out with your work on human evolution that did the same thing. When we did research to find out what does the scaffolding in someone's mind look like with respect to evolution, we asked 600 people who were checking out of Amazon. It was a service you could pay for at the time. You pay someone $10 and it would give them a survey. We asked them, what are your top 2 leading evidences for evolution? If you believe in evolution, regardless of whether what your religious background is, what's the leading top 2 evidences of evolution? And we accumulated and analyzed all the responses, and do you know that 72% of their responses of why they believe in evolution came down to just 4 things. The number 1 thing was human evolution. So if you're going to dismantle the idea, the figment of someone's imagination about human evolution, the March of Progress icon and things like that are the first thing to go after. That was the most often reported idea of evolution. The next one was, of course, Darwin's theory proper. Natural selection plus some mutations over the platform of millions of years progresses vertical evolution. And then the third one was fossils and transitions. That was a third thing that popped up. I honestly have challenged a lot of people who believe in evolution. I want you to read through all of Carl Werner's book cover to cover and tell me you don't change your mind about evolution. It's that powerful. And the fourth one was science as an authority. The idea that, quote, smart scientists in white lab coats believe in evolution is good enough for me. In fact, that was 12% of the reasons where I believe in evolution, because smart people who are smarter than me tell me to believe in it. But what I love about your work is you've taken those number 1 and number 3 and you've crushed them into the next universe. You really have. You've completely taken the legs out of human evolution and fossils and transitions. And so that's part of your compelling work and the philosophy that you go out doing this. The other part I love about your work is you'll take a creature like a lobster and you say, here's what it supposedly looked like millions of years ago, and then here's another shot of it in a stratosphere that's supposed to be 10 million years later. Here's what it looks like, same lobster. Here's what it looks like again, same lobster. And here's what it looks like today, same lobster. No change, but supposedly millions of years. So it's phenomenal work that you've done. The other one that got me was bats. And you look at bats, and now your work says there's been over 1,000 bat fossils photographed and documented in museums. And what do they always show up as? Bats. Just plain bats. And then the other one that got me is your interviews with, I think, Dr. Viola, what was his name, about pterosaurs. Here's this leading, renowned, worldwide expert on pterosaurs. And another guy has published books about pterosaurs, and you put them in a corner and you say, show me the transitions. And they admit to you, 5 feet sitting on the other side of the table to you, we don't have any. When these pterosaurs show up in the fossil record, they were, their words, not mine, perfect. They were perfect pterosaurs. So I don't know how many more facts need to slap people in the face who still believe in this stuff, but by reading through your book, they should become overwhelmingly convinced. And that's how your work really shifted me. And that's why I'm so honored to have you on as a guest of our show today, because it was shifting information. And Carl, we're not just talking about changing someone's mind, because as a man thinketh, so is he, right? So when I became a creationist, I've been a Christian since I was about 11, but I didn't become a creationist believing in the literal account of Genesis until about 15 years ago. But when I did, that 18-inch gap between my heart and my head got snapped into alignment like a chiropractor. And then I became a live wire. My head and my heart were fully aligned. My experiences, my relationship, my love for the Lord was able to join with my mind, and now they had some congruency. And so your work was part of that process, and it lit my faith on fire, because all of those quiet, subtle doubts that I had that teenagers struggle with today all over the world, like, yeah, I believe in creation, I believe that God is real, the Bible seems to make sense, I believe Jesus saved me, but oh yeah, what about Neanderthal man? What about millions of years of deep time and natural selection and all these things? But when those eroded for me, and your work was very instrumental in that erosion, my faith got turned on fire. I raised my family different. My relationship with my wife changed. My relationship with my church changed. My passion for evangelism changed, because now I knew the truth was real. So that's why I am super excited to have you here today. And so I just wanted to give you some time to go over some of the highlights of your work, so that our viewers can have that same experience that I went through when I went through my conversion process.
And you know, I became converted too in college when a friend challenged me about my belief in evolution, about the transitional forms. And I had a 180 experience too, and I was a different person at the end of the year. So,
wow.
So this is the information I want to share with you today. I want to show you that despite what is implied by evolution scientists, that the transitions between animals that should occur because of evolution, of a dog changing into a whale or whatever, they're missing. And they're not just missing some of the time, they're missing nearly every time. And I want to start with my favorite quote, and this is from an atheist. And he's a Harvard professor, he's deceased now, Stephen Jay Gould. And he was an evolutionist, he was a socialist, he was also a communist. So he was no friend of Christians, and he shocked the world when he wrote this in Natural History. Now, Natural History is the magazine put out by the American Museum of Natural History. It's the most, prestigious museum in the world. And he shocked both the evolutionist and the creationist when he wrote in his article that ancestors and descendants must be connected by infinitely numerous transitional links, forming gradual steps of a dog slowly changing into a whale or a mouse slowly changing into a bat. He said that's what Darwin predicted, that's what we believe evolution says, but the fossil record shows no support for gradual change. Now that is a stunning revelation. Now, he said that new species, whether that's a dog, a bat, a pterosaur, or whatever, almost always just suddenly appear in the fossil record with no intermediate links. And he said this rarity of transitions is the trade secret of paleontology. And I have to ask myself, why do you need to make this a secret? If isn't science about just facts, and why would you keep this back as a secret? The museums keep it back as a secret. They try to portray that they have these animals in between, and even the evolutionists believe they have them, but the reality is, and Dr. Gould knew this, he was connected at Harvard. He knew that there was no connections. And the few you have are actually bogus, and I could go through those later today.
Great.
I want to show you what his trade secret is. These are fossils. My wife Debbie took these pictures of the fossil bats that are in the world's collections. Now, the bat fossils are extremely beautiful, and they're extremely complete. We don't have just like one toe bone of a bat. We have complete bats. You can see their ears, you can see their vertebrae, you can see what they ate for lunch before they died in the flood. You can see their wing membranes. When they say they have 1,000 fossil bats, they're not saying just partials. They have these beautiful, complete specimen. But the problem is that evolutionists believe, that the bat, which is a mammal, and flies, came from a land animal that's a mammal. It had to be mammal to mammal, ground to flying. And so you would ask an evolutionist, what animal became a bat? Well, maybe it was a tree shrew, maybe it was a mouse-like animal. Whatever that is, what are the intermediates between the tree shrew and the bat? And I want to ask you this, if you were to try to describe to me what the intermediate animals would look like if they were intermediate animals, like animals A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and H over millions of years, I could just ask you, Dan, well, what would animal D look like if it was halfway evolved between a tree shrew and a bat? It should look like the arms are getting really long, because the tree shrew, the arms are shorter than the legs, see? But the bat, the arms are 6 times longer than the back legs. So the animal D would be halfway evolved. Maybe his arms would be 2/3 as the size of a bat, extremely weird looking, but maybe he wouldn't have a wing membrane yet. Animal G would be, well, maybe that would be his arms are almost fully length, and he's starting to get the wing membrane, but he can't quite fly because all the muscles are still in the back legs, which you use for propulsion. They haven't moved up to the front, which you need for flying, Yeah. And so what would animal B look like? Animal B should be like his arms are just starting to get a little bit longer. And there would be more than just animals A through H to get from a ground mammal to a bat. It would be hundreds of intermediates. The problem is they don't have any animals A, B, C, D, E, F, G, or H. They have 0. Now, when you plug in the numbers, this becomes apparent that this isn't just a problem with lack of fossils. It's a problem that it just doesn't match the theory of evolution. For example, we have 1,000 bats. We have dozens of fossil tree shrews. So I would just think logically you should have dozens, hundreds, or thousands of animals A through H. You should find 400 animal Ds, and you should have 500 animal Es by now. We've been collecting these for 150 years. We should have, 300 or 24 animal Bs. But when we ask these two experts, who are the experts in the world on bat evolution, they say there are no bat ancestors. And so is that just like the exception to the rule? No, that is the rule. And that's what Dr. Gould was talking about. Go from animal to animal to animal, and you won't see the intermediates. And everything that I'm going to talk about from this point forward, it just follows the same pattern. It's the beginning animal, the final animal, and what do you have in between? Gould says you should have found animals A through H, and you really don't.
Even after 1,000 bats have been discovered, they don't have any.
And looking for 150, collecting these all over the world.
150 years.
Yeah, 150
Incredible.
years. We have nothing.
Yeah.
And okay, pterosaurs. You mentioned pterosaurs. That's the flying reptiles. Okay, so it's kind of the same deal. We have all these pterosaur fossils, pterodactyls, rhamphorhynchus, et cetera, 1,000 of them. And they're not just a single toe bone of a pterosaur. We have fossils where you can see the wing membrane. It's beautiful fossils. You can see the rudder on the back of the tail. You can see the teeth. You can see every rib. And the detail in the fossils are incredible. And so if it's a reptile and it flies and it has these extremely long upper extremities to make the wings, what would the animals look like between the ground lizard? It had to evolve from something like a lizard to a flying reptile. What would those intermediates look like? Well, it's the same thing as the bats. Animal E would have to be, its arms are getting really long because the lizard's arms are short. His back legs are long. The pterosaurs, the arms, the hands, and the fingers go all the way out, 8 times the length of the back legs. So Animal E would have to have long arms, but maybe he doesn't have the wing membrane yet. Animal G, he almost has the wing membrane, but it doesn't work. Animal B, he's just a weird lizard with, 3 times the length of the arms, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
But when you ask the evolution experts who work in this field, how many animals have you found of animal A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H? And they say none. None. That is
stunning.
crazy. That is stunning.
It is stunning, yeah.
Here's the expert on pterosaurs. Yeah. He has the collection at the Jura Museum. He said there are no ancestors for pterosaurs. And then you go to the dinosaur evolution experts. We have collected, not we, the evolution community has collected 100,000 dinosaurs. That's 3,000 of these are mostly complete, or they're skeletons.
Semi-articulated.
Yeah, semi-articulated. Yeah. The rest of them are just a single bone here, single bone there. That's a lot of dinosaurs. And so with those dinosaurs, you would expect to find dinosaur evolution. We interviewed the world's expert, Dr. David Weishampel, who wrote the Bible on dinosaur evolution. It's called the Dinosauria. It's about 500 pages. Don't read it. It's a little bit boring. So you would think you would have intermediates going from some weird reptile going up to the dinosaur. Nothing. We asked him, well, what dinosaurs have you found ancestors for? And this is in video 1 of our series. He said, no ancestors for any dinosaur species.
Gosh.
See, that's what Gould was talking about, and that's why it was so upsetting for him to reveal it. 500,000 fish. Now, my wife took all these pictures. When they say they have 500,000 fish in the museums, they're not just a scale or just a fin. They're beautiful, complete specimens. Like that bottom one looks like a bluegill. Top one on the right looks like a ray fin. There's a gar at the bottom left. 500,000 fish. That's just a great fossil record. The problem is when the more fossils you get, it points to the gap is real. It's not artificial. It's not because you haven't had time to find them. We interviewed the top fish evolution expert in the world down in Australia, and he said, look, we have these groups, and the groups would be these stripes up there, like the ray fins or the coelacanths or the bony fish or whatever. The groups are represented by the solid lines, but he said, where I have dots, see the dots? Where it would be the evolution of the first fish into the groups, we have nothing. It's amazing.
That's powerful.
The invertebrates is the same way. Like here's a sea pen. It's found on the lowest layer, Dan. It's a Ediacaran layer. It's 2 feet tall. It's beautiful. It's supposed to evolve from a bacteria, but the bacteria is so small, it's, you have to have a microscope. It's 10,000 times magnified just to see it. So I put that little dot there for the bacteria. The intermediates between the bacteria and the sea pens would be animals A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and H. What animals do you have from between the bacteria and the sea pen? None.
It just shows up fully formed. Yeah.
Fully formed and beautiful, and by the way, modern. And same with the trilobites or the arthropods, no intermediates. Same with the bristleworms or the worm group. There's no intermediates. And same for all the animal groups in the 7 major phyla. The arthropods, the corals, the sponges, the vertebrates, each group shows up with no intermediates between a bacterium and the group. So that's called the Cambrian explosion. And this is what he's talking about. This doesn't match evolution at all. This is like crazy. Why are we even believing this theory anymore?
Yeah.
But, a good doubting Thomas, and I'm a doubting Thomas, and I don't believe anybody. I don't even believe my wife sometimes. No, I'm
mistake, yeah.
I know, it's a mistake. I tend to not believe anybody, and that's because I've been burned so many times in science. And a good doubting Thomas would say, hey, wait a minute, Carl, you have good examples of intermediates, and why are you not showing those? Okay, I'm going to show you the top 3 right now, real quick. Here's whale evolution. They said when we filmed this that this cat at the top evolved into the whale at the bottom through 4 intermediate steps. But as we interviewed them, they all got eliminated. And you can see that in our book series. That's volume 1. It's very incredible. I don't have time to go through that details. I could do that as an hour lecture, but I'll spare you.
Carl, the point about that really blew me away is if you go to the different museums around the world, at least 5 different museums, they will say that the original whale kind is completely different based upon where you go. In one museum, it's a hippo-like creature. Oh, it's a pig-like creature. Oh, it's a cow-like creature. Oh, it's a wolf-like creature. Any place you go and you say the emphatic truth about where that ancestor came from, they pick a different creature.
Right. And when we did our interviews, now the lead scientist is saying it was a dik-dik, which is a deer. A deer became a whale. So
and Darwin thought it was a bear. So,
and Darwin thought it was a bear. So kind of ridiculous.
Yeah.
Second best proof of evolution that the doubting Thomas would say, why don't you talk about dinosaurs evolving into birds? That's a fair question, because that is considered one of the best proofs of evolution. This is from the Smithsonian, this diagram, and I just took it last year, and it shows a big dinosaur, 2,000-pound dinosaur, going to a 1,000-pound dinosaur, going smaller and smaller and smaller from left to right until you get to the first bird, which is called Archaeopteryx. Now, that looks like they have all the proof. In fact, I was kind of taken back. I thought, I didn't know they had these. And so I started to do the research and looked up each fossil they have on there, and look what it is. They made the diagram up. All the dinosaurs that were supposed to be the ancestors to the first bird came afterwards. It came after the first bird. That's a very embarrassing scientific piece of work there.
Oh, it is.
That's the second best proof of evolution. And the third is that humans evolved from apes. This diagram was an active diagram when Dr. Gould made this statement that they're rare, these transition fossils are rare. And yet here is proof of human evolution, but we did the interviews, and actually there was 13 fraud diagrams.
What a lineup.
I understand if you don't believe me. You can read all the interviews in volume 4 in our book series, and it dissects that chart by book and verse. The one that wasn't a fraud was just a mistake. So really all those are not ape men. So there you go. So there's really no excuse for not having fossil intermediates. There is no excuses, because right now in the fossil collections of the world, we have a billion, that's billion, not a million, a billion fossils. 1,000 museums, each have about 1 million fossils. That's 1 billion fossils have been collected. They only collect the best of the best.
Yeah.
And the fossils aren't only big dinosaurs. We have fossil bacteria, things that you wouldn't think would even fossilize. We have fossil fish eggs. You would think a fish egg wouldn't fossilize. No, we have fossil fish eggs. We have fossil animal embryos, before they're born. 2 cells, 4 cells, 8 cells, 16 cells. These are microscopic. We have that. So look at the level of preservation in the fossil record. We even have fossilized jellyfish. How does a jellyfish get fossilized? I don't know, but here we are. We have no more excuses to say, well, the reason we can't find the intermediates is because they weren't fossilized. Well, with 1 billion fossils of worms, of flowers, of cattail heads, all these soft things, alligator poop, you would think that you would have a complete fossil record. Every museum should show every group forming through, and you just actually, no more charts, by the way. You actually just follow the fossils in the museums. Let's take me from a bacteria to a fish. Oh, we don't have any intermediates between a bacteria and a fish. None. Zero.
Oh, gosh.
This proves creation, and it's a slam dunk. The problem is that people can't absorb it. I got it, and you got it, but you almost have to go back and rewatch this show again and almost read that book, The Grand Experiment, and go through it. It's just hard to, it's like, well, what have I been told all my life? All this was made up, and the answer to that is yes.
Carl, that in the book of Ecclesiastes, the writer says, this is the sum of the matter. Let me sum up your talk here using 2 words, one Latin phrase and the other a Hebrew one. The Latin is ex nihilo, and God spoke out of nothing.
There you go.
God created out of nothing. And then the Hebrew word is mabul, which is the Hebrew word for the great flood, the great deluge, the flood that trumps all the other flood. What I see in your work is really proof and evidence of those 2 things, because what you've substantiated by looking at hundreds of thousands of fossils across hundreds of museums is that God spoke, and these baramins, these created kinds, they show up as created kinds, and they stay as created kinds. There's some extinction that goes on, some variability within kinds, but you've proven ex nihilo. God spoke these animal kinds into existence out of nothing. And then this second part, Mabul, the great flood, is if you look through all of these books we have hundreds of dollars worth of old books that talk about paleontology, chemistry, histology, fossils and paleontology, all these things. They all say one thing about fossils: immediate burial. You have to have immediate burial.
Yes.
How are you going to fossilize fish eggs and jellyfish and fish in the process of eating other fish with the fish in its stomach?
That's right.
It's a snapshot. If we look at the collection of fossils around the world, which is billions, and you say the museums have got billions, how many more still remain in the layers of the dirt? We have immediate burial. We have proof of the Mabul. And then we have proof of ex nihilo, creation spoken into existence out of nothing. Your work testifies to those two great truths in ways that are really undeniable.
Yeah, and that's why there are no intermediates, just for the audience. That's why there are no intermediates, because there never was.
Yeah.
The animals were created. God created a lion. He created a sea pen. And the sea pen didn't evolve from something. The lion didn't evolve something. It just sudden appearance of animal groups because God created them. There was no evolution.
Thank you very much for joining us today. You've given our viewers a lot to think about, and I know this is life-changing information. And thank you again for making your works. They certainly changed my life and my family and the success of my generation for generations, in part because of the ministry work that your books did to get me converted that the Bible's real history.
Thank you, Dan.
Appreciate it. God bless.
God bless you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me on your show.
All right.